We have a large number of migrants who are either street homeless or vulnerably housed in the capital. The reasons for this are fairly obvious. If you look at London and you look at our population, over 40% of our population are born abroad. And then if you look at the different systems which migrants have to cope with as opposed to those who are British citizens, well, to be fair, British citizens have to deal with some pretty awful systems as well. But often there's absolutely nothing there for migrants to actually tackle their own issues. So then it's very, very unsurprising that very many of them found themselves homeless and destitute. Now, a lot of the factors which contribute to migrant homelessness actually aren't any different than those for the rest of the population. So relationship breakdown, mental health issues, substance misuse issues, they all play a part in migrant homelessness and can impact upon them. But the one key factor which mitigates against migrants is immigration status, or lack of it in many cases. Now, migrants is a ridiculously broad term and covers a huge range of people. At Praxis, we say that we work with at-risk migrants, and that includes a very wide range of people. So it includes European migrants and non-European migrants. It includes those with some kind of immigration status and those who have none. And it includes those who arrived a very long time ago, often decades ago, and it includes those who arrived very recently. So it's a huge range of people. And the UK immigration system itself is a very large, vast, complicated beast which spreads its tentacles into many different areas of life and impacts upon migrants in many different ways. Without the correct immigration status or the correct documentation to show that you have the correct immigration status, to be slightly more accurate, you won't be able to access welfare benefits, employment, social housing, private rented housing, a driver's license, a bank account, most medical treatment, or get married in the UK. So all of these things can be impacted by your immigration status, and this is what we commonly refer to as the hostile environment for migrants, or as the Home Office would have it more recently, the compliant environment. But it looks pretty hostile to me. Now, I think the key thing to remember when you're working in night shelters and working with homeless migrants is that there is no obligation on any person to report migrants, undocumented or otherwise, to the Home Office. And neither is there any law against providing advice and services to a person who doesn't have immigration status, as long as you don't advise them to break the law. So, for example, I advise migrants all the time on their immigration status. Lots of those people don't have an immigration status. I can tell them what possibilities they might have in terms of applying for immigration status, but what I can't say to them is, well, you don't seem to have any options, so I just suggest you keep your head down and hide and go under the radar, because then I'm suggesting that they do something which would breach the law. I can tell them, you don't have any immigration options at the moment, I'm sorry, but I can't really take that one step further and advise them to break the law at that stage. So what do you do if you're faced with a homeless migrant? Panic seems to be one of the first reactions, because it's so complicated and people assume, well, there can't be anything that I can do, surely it's too complicated for me. And that's half right in some respects, because the one thing that you absolutely must not do is give immigration advice. Anyone who gives immigration advice in the UK must be accredited and managed by the Solicitor's Regulatory Authority or the Office of the Immigration Services Commissioner. If you provide immigration advice without being regulated by one of those two bodies, you're actually committing a criminal offence. I used to do training in prisons, and I used to train people and tell them that and hope that they would laugh. And then one man said, actually, I'm in prison for that, so I've stopped doing that in prisons nowadays. But anyway, you must not ever give immigration advice. I mean, the practical reasons for that, one is it's very complicated, and two is it changes very, very fast. The law around immigration is changing all the time, and quite small things can count as immigration advice. Giving someone an immigration form can count as immigration advice. Helping someone to fill in an immigration form can count as immigration advice. So you have to be quite careful when it comes to immigration factors, what you do and don't do. So what can you do then if you can't give immigration advice? Well, really, a key thing that you can do is find out as much information as you can about their immigration status without giving advice, and that should hopefully help you to work out where they should go next, who you can refer them to, who you can signpost them for further help. So you need to be talking to them, you need to be asking questions. What questions do you need to be asking? Well, I was trying to think of some of the key questions earlier. One of the most obvious ones is, do you have any documents relating to your immigration status? Yes, wonderful, good. Let's take some copies of those so we can get someone to have a look at those for you and tell you what those mean. Very good. If they don't have documents, or even if they do you or have you ever had a solicitor or an immigration advisor helping you with your case? If so, do you have the details of that person, and can we get in touch with them and find out a little bit about what's been going on in your immigration case? So that could be quite helpful. Do you know if you're waiting for the Home Office to make a decision on your case is a good question to ask. So that can hopefully help find out, have they got a case which is ongoing at the moment, or have they not? The problem is people are often not very clear, so you can only do your best with the information they can provide, but people are often very vague. Well, I submitted a case through a solicitor 3 years ago, but then I couldn't get hold of the solicitor and I lost my mobile phone and I don't know where they are. They're somewhere in Wood Green or something like that. But still, it's worth trying to ask and seeing what you can find out. Then you can start asking a few more general questions. Where are you from? How long have you been in the UK? What have you been doing since you've been in the UK? How have you been supporting yourself up until now? Do you have family members in the UK? What's their immigration status? Is there a particular reason why you can't go back to your country of origin? Do you have any health problems that we need to know about? Some of these you'd probably be asking as part of your role in the night shelter anyway, but all of these might be pertinent to someone's immigration situation. If you have someone who is from a European country or is the family member of someone who is from a European country or has been a family member of someone in the past, then there's other key information that you might want to know. For example, have they been working in the UK and do they have any evidence of that work? And what was their European family member doing in the UK? Was that family member working? What relationship did they have with that person? When did it break down and why? Because all of these things could be key to European rights. And again, a good immigration advisor would be able to tell you that. So you can do a bit of feeling round and pulling this information together without actually giving anyone advice. But that will help you to take the next step to get someone else to have a look at the case. Because what you need to do now is get them to someone who can give them advice on their immigration situation. And I think that that's a lot easier said than done. There is very little good immigration advice out there. There is even less good free immigration advice out there. So a key thing that you should be doing generally in your winter night shelters is finding out who is there in your area who gives immigration advice. What kind of cases do they take on? What kind of chocolates and biscuits do they like, and can you visit them and make a good relationship with them? Because the better your relationship with them, the easier it will be for you to refer people to them or get them to take a look at the cases that you have and help them with that. The other relationships that I think are key in working with migrants is that you should be making relationships with a good housing solicitor in your area, because again, in many cases, migrants do have some rights to particular kinds of housing, usually through social services, and a good housing solicitor who knows that can be very helpful. There is legal aid for housing cases, even if you are an undocumented migrant, so that's useful to know. For European nationals, you need to know your benefits advisors. Does your local law centre have a good benefits advisor? Because again, there is a lot of grey areas when it comes to Europeans accessing benefits law. And just because someone's been told no once by Job Centre Plus is never a reason to give up. Get advice, see if decision can be challenged, see if there is something that can be done, because the law is very tricky in those areas. Make use of what support networks there are. I've put on your tables lots of information about St Martin's Frontline Network, which is a great resource for people who are on the front line who want to share information with other people working on the front line and find out a bit more. They have a forum, an online forum that you can go to and register. We're working with St Martin's Frontline Network to run some events for people who are working with homeless migrants and talk to them a bit more about their experiences and share information about things that we can do. So again, if you'd like to be on that list, let me know and I can tell you when we next have events. There are other useful resources. The Housing and Immigration Group is a Google group where I always say housing law and immigration law collide, where all the immigration lawyers ask all the housing lawyers questions and all the housing lawyers ask all the immigration lawyers questions. And when we want to get a good housing lawyer for someone, we always use the Housing and Immigration Google group to try and get someone on board. I have, by the way, printed out a sheet of some resources which I will pass out to you once I've finished talking. So yeah, make use of what resources are already there. Homeless Link also has some excellent resources on working with homeless migrants, both Europeans and non-Europeans, and lots of information about benefits for European migrants and how they might be accessed, which is really good. But when you're coming across migrants, as I say, you get lots of different kinds of status, and how you deal with people might be slightly different. So you do find many homeless migrants who actually have status, and it isn't a question of their immigration status why they are homeless. So refugees, for example, may fall into this category. That's someone who's been given permission to stay in the UK because they're seen as having a case to stay here, but they don't fit a priority need in terms of homelessness, they're single, and they end up street homeless. It happens a lot, particularly when people have been sent off to other areas of the country, dispersal as we call it, and then they come back to London because this is where the only community that they know is, and they have no local connection. So they would be treated in pretty much the way you would deal with any other homeless person in many ways. You have migrants who have status but no documents, in which case it's a question of getting them documents, which again is easier to say than do, and they may well need immigration advice for that. And then you have some migrants who have an ongoing application with the Home Office. If it's an asylum application, that's great. That gives them an entitlement to asylum support, and they can make that application for asylum support, and the government should support them while they're going through that asylum application. But for any other kind of application, they don't necessarily have any entitlement to support, which often surprises people because you can't remove them at that point. They have to stay here for their application, but they don't have any entitlements to anything, and they can't work. So they're often in a kind of catch-22 situation. In those kind of situations, it's often good to make use of hosting facilities if you have any, or other voluntary and charity networks which can do short-term accommodation for people outside of night shelters. If an organisation knows someone has a route out, then it's often easier for them to offer temporary accommodation on a short-term basis. If someone doesn't have an immigration application ongoing, then you need to get them good immigration advice to see if there's an application that they can make as quickly as possible. As said, not always easy, but do talk to your local law centres, do talk to your local organisations and see who's out there who can help to make sure that people get the right advice. And then just to say that there are many clients who have no immigration status and no case to make. There are lots of people out there who are in that situation, and there is very little that any of us can do to help someone in that situation. Immigration law is a series of boxes. If you don't fit into the box to make an application, then the Home Office isn't interested, no matter how compassionate your case may seem to someone else. In those kind of cases, what you have to accept is that your winter night shelter is simply a welcome respite from the streets for someone for a little while, or from the kind of precarious housing or accommodation that they have in the interim, and just do your best for them while they're there to give them the care and support that they need and can benefit from. That's a deliberate policy by the government to try and coerce people to going back to the countries that they come from. This is part of the hostile environment, that people will be left on the streets in those circumstances, and no one can address that really without a change of government. If you're up for that, I'm up for that as well. So that's really all I can say in a very limited period of time about migrant homelessness. As said, I will be here to answer questions afterwards. I do have some resources that I can give you and some examples of some of the materials I've talked about that you can find on some of the other websites. And I'm very happy to talk to any of you about advice and assistance you need. I will say that we use the winter night shelters frequently in Praxis to help our clients. They're an incredible resource to us while they're open during the cold months, and we are thankful for them every year. So thank you for the work that you and all your churches do to help set up this very essential resource each year.